am a researcher for the lynching site projects of Memphis. When I was getting my graduate degree at the University of Memphis in museum studies and American history, I became a researcher for the lynching site projects of Memphis. And what they do is they find the locations where lynchings had happened in Memphis and try to find as much information about them so we can put up markers, and the markers are here to just educate the public about the past. So we're all working from a place of truth. So the first case that I was given 6 newspaper articles about a lynching that happened here in Memphis, Tennessee on New Year's Day, 1851. So I am in Coffeeville, Mississippi. You can see the Coffeeville sign behind me, knowing that this city was established in 1834 in Yalobusha County. It's the Yalobusha County seat. And this is where David Heron lived. This is where the enslaved man ran away from. This is what he confessed to before he died, that he was from Coffeeville. In 1850, there was no census of population, but the last population in 1880 was 750 people. Today, there's about 820 people. It's 55% African American, about 45% white. And it's named after John Coffee. John Coffee was a soldier. He fought with Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812, and he actually is married to a descendant of Andrew Jackson's wife. So this is where I would start my investigation, in this town. It's about 2 hours south of Memphis, in the middle of Mississippi. And I'm at where David Heron's plantation would have been. And I got this information from the History of Coffeeville Methodist Church book. It was from 1824 to 1970. It was published in 1970. And I found this at the archives of the University of Memphis. But it says that on the west side of Tennessee Street, which is where we are, Oklahoma Street is one street over, this is Tennessee Street. And on the west side of Tennessee Street, almost opposite of the Carnegie House, which is what this little opening would have been right here. This still stands today. So almost opposite of the Carnegie House stood the home of Colonel and Mrs. David Heron. So it would have been here in this area where there's now like a factory and some school buses. And then Samuel Heron also lived close by. And so that Joy Heron's great-great-grandfather would have lived down there. But this David Heron lived here. This is where the enslaved man ran away from. He ran away from this plantation that would have been here at this location. So I was able to piece that together, but not able to piece together his name. Surprised where you find history that you're looking for. This was in a church history. So they obviously must have been Methodists to put them in a church history to say where their homes were located in Coffeeville. So make sure you're exhausting all your resources when you are looking for the history of people. So here I am at the Coffeeville Courthouse in Yalobusha County. So what was the gentleman doing in Memphis, Tennessee? This is a newspaper article that was in the Memphis Daily Appeal. We learned from the Coffeeville Appeal that the Negro who was executed at this place for murder of Colonel J.K. Chester was the property of D.L. Heron of Coffeeville. He had, says the appeal, permission from his master to go to Hardeman County on a visit, but instead came to this purpose for making way to a free state. Before leaving Coffeeville, he obtained permission by some means of free papers belonging to a color man of that place. This person was enslaved to David Heron of Coffeeville, Mississippi. And so it brought me here to Coffeeville, Mississippi Courthouse to look at their records to see if I could find any wills or probates or records from David Heron of this man to find his name. I spent many hours in this courthouse. I spent many hours in their archives. I never was able to directly find his name, but I'm going to show you what that archive record looked like, what it looks like to have to do that work and to go through old records that haven't been digitalized. But this is the Yalobusha County Courthouse, built in 1834. So here I am in the actual archives in the Coffeeville Courthouse, and this is the place I came to try to give this enslaved man a name. So I had to look through the records in here. So as you can see, they have these makeshift rollers, and then you would get in here to get into the records. In one of these books that look like this, and I would have to look through them and look at the writing. And this is 1835. Now, when you're working with paper in an archive, sometimes you will see people wear gloves because of the oils on your hand. My recommendation is just wash your hands, make sure they're clean, because wearing gloves can sometimes damage the paper even more than working with your hands, because the gloves can catch and tear, and you won't be able to have the dexterity to turn and read. So as long as your hands are free from oil and lotion, it is pretty much a better material to use. At one point, the Coffeeville high school students came here and took old records and kind of bound them together based on name. Boxes like these are usually acid-free boxes that keep paper from turning. And then you'd have to look for the name. And I remember David Heron's name was in one of these. If I could see anything about this enslaved man that I was looking for, there was nothing in all of his papers. I tried to find his other family members' papers as well to see if maybe it just got misfiled. Again, I couldn't find anything in his other family members' papers, but this is how those papers were all stored. Again, it's kind of good to, when you go through these things, to check off the books you looked at and what you found in them, because it can get kind of confusing and tedious, but you want to make sure that you're knowing what you've looked through and what you haven't. I am at the Coffeeville Cemetery in Coffeeville, Mississippi, and this is the Heron plot. This is where the Herons are buried, and David Heron is actually buried right over here. It says Lieutenant Colonel David Heron, born August 3rd, 1824, and died April 6, 1862 at the Battle of Shiloh. Now, from the interview we got with Joy Heron, who is his great-great-grandniece, she thinks that he didn't die at Shiloh, that he was injured at Shiloh. That's why he was loaded onto a train and not buried at Shiloh, like most people who had died at Shiloh were buried at Shiloh because they didn't have the resources to take anybody back. But because he was injured, he was loaded onto the train by his servant Spencer, by his enslaved man Spencer that he brought with him, and that he died on that train ride. Now, Miss Heron thinks that he must have been a good master. He must have been a good master because Spencer brought his body back. There are many reasons why an enslaved man would bring their enslaver back. It might not be that he was a good master. It might be protection, to travel. You can travel as a black man in the South during the Civil War if you had a white body with you that was your master. Maybe Spencer had family on the plantation that he wanted to get back to, and this was his way of getting back to them. Maybe he thought he'd be looked at favorably by bringing David's body back, and then maybe him and his family could be free to go. What came out yesterday from our interview is that Spencer, someone is writing a book about Spencer, and that Spencer actually changed his name, because I tried to find Spencer's name in the archives to see if he ever wrote about an enslaved man being lynched in Memphis in 1851. Or it was a story that was passed down or something along those lines. But this is David Heron's grave. But this is where, so usually if everybody's put on an obelisk, they also put the tombstones for their individuals. So there's his wife and Fanny and Minnie, so his first wife and then his two children. So David Heron is here. And then Joy Heron has actually purchased a tombstone. We had talked about that yesterday because she basically takes care of this cemetery. She actually is the one who kind of oversees it all. but I'm pretty sure, yes, here's her grave marker. So Miss Heron, who I interviewed yesterday, this will be where she is buried, and those are her parents behind her, and that's her brother. I have walked the cemetery before. There is a lot of old graves, Confederate graves. This cemetery is kind of famous for a person being, not famous, but known for a person being buried standing up. I could at least show it to you. So it is right here. This is the grave of Alexander Gillian, and he is buried standing up. He died September 6, 1859 in Coffeeville, Yalobusha County. I guess he was helping to make the courthouse, and he had fell and died, and he said he always wanted to be buried standing up, so they used the brick that they were using to build the courthouse to bury him standing up. So I am at the grave of Julia Bradley Chester. This is John Chester's wife, 1812 to 1882. She's buried in Elmwood Cemetery. Here's the map. She is in the Evergreen section. I got this from the museum office. Very helpful in there as well. They pretty much know every gravesite here. So she looks like she's buried by her daughter. But Julia Chester was alive when John Chester was killed. There is some evidence of her actually suing a partnership that Chester was in to get some compensation after her husband is killed. Now, of course, John Chester is not here. And that's what led me to believe that John Chester is buried in the old Memphis cemetery that is no longer marked, that is by St. Jude has built a parking lot over. But this is Julia Chester here in Elmwood Cemetery. It took us a while to find. I had some good trusty backup over there that was helping me look for graves. So we spent some time in here looking through them. So if you are ever in a cemetery doing cemetery searches, it's nice to have some help because there's a lot to be looking for. So what is a lynching? Like when someone uses that term, what does that mean? What's the definition of it? So I've seen things from the NAACP, I've seen things from the Equal Justice Initiative. What the consensus seems to be that two or more people are inflicting their justice, or what they believe the social norm of justice to be on a person. So for lynching to be constituted under that term, the people doing the lynching have to believe that they are doing justice, that somebody has broken a social norm, someone has broken their law, and they have the authority to inflict the punishment on them. So in this case, the mob felt that they had the authority to inflict this justice on this person without repercussion. And that's how lynching gets kind of embedded into the legal system. No one's ever brought to justice for lynching. It gets condoned. So it's okay. And that's a way to scare people who are black that they don't really have justice. They don't really get seen under the legal system. They don't really get the protection under the legal system. That's why you have this disconnect between people of the African American community and the legal system. So lynching has set kind of a bedrock for that. Thousands of lynchings happen in America, thousands. These are the ones that we can find, that were written about, that they have newspaper articles, that we can actually look at facts. When a historic marker is written, when I wrote this historic marker, every single line has to be verified. Every single word has to be verified. I can't make up a word. I can't use a word to embellish or to take away power. It has to come from a primary source. So a newspaper article or a document, a probate, something like that. Everything has to be cited. So I tried to find any record at the Shelby County Archives of maybe the city of Memphis suing David Heron for a pauper's funeral, or the Chester family suing David Heron for the killing of their patriarchal and their family, their patriarch. I could not find any of that. Then I thought maybe David Heron would have sued Memphis, the city of Memphis, for his property. Couldn't find any of that at all. But I'm very thankful for the Lynching Site Project for giving me this case, for doing this work. This marker was dedicated in October of 2019. And when I dedicated his marker, I was very emotional because I see him. I shed tears for his life, and I am proud to do this research, and I will continue to do it. So thank you, Lynching Site Project in Memphis, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for listening to the story. If you're ever in Memphis, Tennessee, I hope you stop and see the marker. It's right here on 2nd Street, 2nd and Market, right by the hotel here. And thank you for joining me on this Walk with History.